Lovely. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you also for the Stockholm Association of Architects for inviting me. It's always very interesting for me when I go to places where there's a really strong culture of design, and a culture of design in a way now that is influencing, I think, design all over the world. And of course, I come from a very different world where perhaps the notion of design is not something that's so studied, is not something that you train for, it's something that you learn as a maker. There's a lot of improvisation on the streets. And so for my journey coming from India and then going to the Royal College of Art on the recommendation of Jasper Morrison, in a way you would think Jasper Morrison and Indian design are probably really the opposites. And then meeting Jonathan Levien, who was my classmate at the Royal College, coming very much from a making background, a background in industrial design, and really knowing how to make things. And of course, somebody like me in India, most middle-class children don't know how to make anything because you have other people to make things for you. But of course, I always had a love for the maker. So I think in a way, in some ways, my partnership with Jonathan is very much rooted in that sense that each of us have something that the other doesn't. What I want to do really in the talk today is to share our process. Should I start it? How do I start? Okay. Is to talk really about how throughout our work in over 10 years, I would say, we've really tried to challenge and defy what people would say is try to have a design style, for example. For us, it's very important that every project that we do, and you will see through the selection of projects I've chosen today, is that we've always tried to do things that also challenge us in terms of what we like, what we see, and to work on a very broad spectrum of projects. We both have a studio in the East End of London, traditionally an area of immigrants, of Jewish immigrants, the Huguenots, the Bangladeshis, and there are a lot of workshops still. It was also the industrial heart of London, many years ago. And we started our career very much in a sort of industrial building near Spitalfields Market, and it was really authentic loft living. It wasn't stylish, so to speak. And our studio is on Columbia Road near the Flower Market. This space was actually an artist studio before and a furniture factory. And you can see the spirit of the space really also influences the work that we do. I'm going to start with the project in a way which talks about seeing beauty everywhere. And this year we launched a project in Milano with BD Barcelona, which was very inspired by these corrugated structures, which I call makeshift architecture, which you see everywhere from Sao Paulo, to India and Africa, where people who actually cannot afford to make housing use this very cheap industrial material to create architecture for themselves. And I love this authorship of architecture not done by architects. And of course, for a lot of people, this is a very ugly thing because it's a shanty town, but I find it really beautiful, the layering of the materials, and also that juxtaposed against one of the UN, United Nations heritage site in India. So the project is called Shanty, and it was a series of cabinets, and it's really about the beauty of improvisation. And inspired very much from this architecture, we did this cabinet for BD Barcelona, where you have this sense of, this material coming together, material that's faded in the sun, and it's not a very precious material. And then the surprise of actually opening the cabinet and having very practical storage inside. Jonathan and I work very much with an idea, so we are hardly ever concerned with how things are made, not because we don't care about how things are made, but for us it's very important that we start with a sketch or a model, and then the final piece, in fact, is better than what we started with, and it keeps the integrity of the idea. And of course, most people don't like color, so in this cabinet we also started working with the absence of color. and then to take away the pattern altogether, but still to keep an essence of the architectural nature of the material. And then, of course, so there's this project which is very much influenced by improvised architecture. But a lot of the pieces that we do actually is also about creating space, to use furniture to create a world. And we launched this chair with B&B Italia. It's called Almora. And it was very inspired from this idea of the views of the Himalaya mountains. What kind of chair do you want to be in? You know, so you're in the safety of the indoors and you have this beautiful vista, to look at. And so the Almora was very much a private chair, but then it was also a very a public chair that you turn around and you're in the home with your family. And I wanted to share with you in a way that this is how the chair starts, literally like pieces of paper stapled, together, sitting together and just trying to capture the essence of the construction of a piece, for example. And I think that you can do a lot with very humble materials. And I think that in our studio, we make a lot of things. So if you come to our studio, it's always a mess because it's full of mock-ups, it's full of models, sketches, objects. And we still like to work in that way. And of course, then we use the computer. But I think to capture the essence, it happens at that level. This is the piece, Almora. So you can see that although it's enclosing, it's not something that shuts you off. And it has a very sensual combination of materials. It has leather, it has sheepskin for the head. And then also in this chair, you really don't have a sense of how the piece goes together. So there's also a lot of technical innovation that goes into the piece, but I don't think the person who's using the piece has to know how technical it is. I don't think it's something to really show off. It's something that you know is there, but you don't have to see it. So a lot of engineering goes into creating those junctions, but they're invisible to the eye. We often work with companies all over the world, mainly in Europe at the moment. And a few years ago, Jonathan and I felt that there are no design companies in London, as you probably know. There are many design studios, but there are no manufacturers for design. And we were saying it would be nice if we could literally go somewhere in 20 minutes and work with a maker. And who are the people that we could work with in London? And we realized actually the best makers in London are people who make suits for men or shoes for men. There's a real culture of making bespoke clothing and gentlemen's grooming, so to speak. And we came across these makers called John Lobb. They make shoes for the Queen, for Tom Cruise, you name it. You know, you go into their cellar and you see these lasts beautifully sculpted by hand for all these people in the world. And we thought it would be really interesting to work with a company like that. And when we went to John Lobb, they said, nothing has changed in 500 years. We haven't changed anything. And they thought it was a very good thing, you know. And we looked in their cabinet and you had these really old-fashioned shoes and, you know, you could take a Gucci shoe in there and they will make it for you. For me, I don't see the value in it, but they do it. So we decided to call the project Apprentice, and we had funding for it because this is not the kind of project, you know, any commercial person pays you to do. So we applied for funding from the Arts Council of England, and we called it Apprentice. So the idea for this project was that we learn from the makers and the makers learn from us, from designers. And of course, when we first started the project, we thought we'll do something really amazing in different materials. And we realized that they have such a skill in making with leather, and that there's 7 people involved in making one shoe. You know, from the person who measures your left and right foot, they make your last, and then, you know, you start the process of designing the shoe. And I like the idea that, you know, whenever we enter a project, it's like entering another universe, you know. And for me, there's a similarity between shoe or an ice cream or architecture. I feel that there's a real link between all these areas. And I think as a designer, I truly believe that I can design and we can design anything. And of course, you have to learn, but it's something that our work is very much based on that research. And with John Lobb, of course, we started really enjoying the shape of the foot and to wrap the leather around the foot. And these shoes cost more than £2,000, you know, so it's not about fashion. These are shoes that people have for 20, 30 years. They go to the workshop and have them repaired. So we thought, how can we move the design so that it's still a shoe that, because the pleasure is completely yours when you wear the shoe. It's not Gucci, it's not Hermes, nobody sees the label, you know, but the fact that it's made for you. So we really played with wrapping the leather around your foot. And you know, normally you have broguing on the front of the shoe. It's a flower. We said it can be the initial of the person whose shoe it is. So it's very subtle, your idea of enjoying something that's made specifically for you. And this is called saddle, and it's very inspired from the shape of a saddle. And I think the images are a bit compressed in this direction, but it doesn't matter. And in this, again, we made an asymmetrical shoe, but of course you always see a shoe as a pair. And when we started designing for them and we said, oh, we want to do women's shoes, they said, we don't do women's shoes. They changed their mind all the time. And when we started the project, actually, I wanted to do a very pretty shoe, and I very soon realized they will not be able to make it, or that they don't want to make it, forget about being able to make it. And Jonathan had to sculpt the heel for them because they hadn't made such a big heel. But we sort of said, okay, well, how can you take a very masculine shoe and make a shoe for women, which is sort of not your Louboutin red and sexy in that sort of overtly, in this overt way, but something that's sensual and feminine, and yet not so gender specific, and using a combination of materials. And this was my favorite shoe. It's called Perfect. It's the shoe I wanted to find in their cabinet. Then skipping on to a more industrial project that we did with Moroso. It's a very important company that we collaborate with. And often ideas, as you see, come from different places. Sometimes you want to work in a city, you know, sometimes you're inspired by architecture. And this project really started with this material called liquid wood. Because Jonathan and I, we've always wanted to make an industrial chair, but we said, do we need to make another plastic chair? You know, they're so homogeneous, they look like so perfect, and that's the reason we don't like them. And then we came across this material, it's called liquid wood, and it could be injection molded in wood. And you can see the material has a smell, it has a patina, because when you mold liquid wood, the moisture from the wood creates these stains on the material. And we said, how do we take the language of a constructed chair and then injection mold it? And we were very inspired by this American artist, Martin Puryear's sculptures of taking these slats of wood and having the structure around it. And we started experimenting with this idea of making a chair which feels like it's made in wood, but is impossible to be made in wood. So the project was called Impossible Wood. And you can see, again, this process of mocking up in the studio and you know, making pieces and sitting on it and trying them out. Jonathan, if you think I'm missing something, please interrupt. So this was the final piece, but it was really interesting. We couldn't actually make it in the liquid wood because the material wasn't sophisticated enough. So in the end, we ended up making a plastic chair. So it was impossible to make in liquid wood. But we tried very hard, you know. You can see in a way that from the B&B project, the Almora armchair, to the lob shoes, which are very English, very understated. And I have a love for textiles and embroidery. And my aunt used to have a workshop of 50 master crafts, men and women, who used to make embroideries for Hermes, Issey Miyake, and a very small studio in her house. And I used to love the way these women used to sit on the floor with all the, making big embroideries. And I used to love the embroideries in progress. And I felt that pieces in progress are somehow more beautiful than the finished piece. So we started this project where we started studying embroidery techniques. And I was just drawing these on a piece of paper, the different embroidery techniques. And when I showed the project to Nani Markina, she said, that's a rug in a way. So a series of sketches became the starting point of a collection of rugs called Rabari. And Rabari are a tribe in India. They do a lot of beautiful mirror work. They're known for their embroideries and a very joyful, celebratory approach to materials. And this was the origin of, sometimes you're asked to model for your own pieces, which you do, you know. And this is just to show you the process. In fact, this was a sketch in the notebook, which then became the rug. And you can see the sequins, is that, yeah. So you can see just trying on the different embroidery techniques of having sequins, of having mirror work, you know, and other stitch techniques. And I don't like pile rugs because for me they feel very cheap. Nowadays everybody sends an Illustrator file somewhere in India and, you know, people make these pile rugs. And I really wanted to show the knotting of the rug and the process. And it takes 100 days to make one rug, and 3 or 4 people are making these rugs on a loom. And what I love is that when you make something by hand, you have the possibility of each knot being different, and you can have that sense of freedom when you're doing this work. And each piece is unique because each piece is made by hand. And you can see the making in progress. And also to communicate who are the people who make these things, for me is very important. But also for someone like me coming out of India, when I saw that image, I was shocked because I thought, my God, this person's hands are so dark. Because of course I live in Europe, and I of course said, of course they are dark. You know, these things are made by people in different parts of the world, and it's really important to show that who is making this piece. And Nani Markina made a really beautiful film. And this is another rug that we did in the same collection. We did 4, and this was again a technique I saw which was done for making a beautiful jacket. I think it was for Miyake, where the women in the workshop, they spread the thread around, and then they put another piece of fabric on it, and then they hold the thread together. And that sort of inspired this project. But again, as you can see in the way that we use pattern, for me, I'm a very logical person. So for me, pattern in a way has to have a sense of purpose. It needs to be defining something or breaking a grid or having a mathematical pattern. And it's something that you know, we work on. This is also to show you how each edge is embroidered, you know, is finished by hand. This project is a project we did for Moroso again, and it started with, it's called Paper Planes, and it was a project that started, in fact, with Swarovski coming to us and saying, could you please use crystal in a way that architects like it and interior designers like it? Because of course they know that maybe a lot of people in design don't really like crystal. It's a difficult material. And of course I'm not sure I like crystal very much, but you know, it was a real challenge to work on this project. So we decided to use crystal in a way that you only see the light of the crystal, and we combined it with wool. So the idea was that you take the crystal and you make a grid, but you make the grid in a way that you can cut and then make a chair pattern out of it, and you'll see it further down. And this was the Paper Planes chair. And thus you can see how we made the grid in the studio, but then the grid was made in the way that when you cut it and the chair comes together, there's a logic to how the pattern works. And you can see the fabric. In fact, you don't see the crystal when you encounter the chair. You just see the light coming from the crystal. And the chair are called Paper Planes because it was also very much about making planes out of paper, grid paper. It was about reading a paper or a book. And also, again, this sense of creating a space through the piece that you know, we create. And also, if you see that, again, there's a link for me between the Rabari rugs and the pattern of the chair, because the pattern of the chair also shows an understanding of tailoring. And it's not like we create fabric that can be used for any piece. Whenever we do fabric, it's made specifically for a piece. And then we worked on a jacquard as well, and we work a lot with color and the logic of the weave as well. I think that creating pieces that are for spaces, in a way, actually what Jonathan and I want to do is we want to create spaces. We want to create public spaces. We want to create hotels and, you know, spaces that people use. So, of course, when Anna invited us, I was really happy. I thought, ooh, you know, it'd be great to actually talk to architects, and I hope some of you are architects here. But when we were invited to create our dream home in Cologne for IMM, which is a big fair in Cologne, they said, we want to create your vision of a perfect house. And then, of course, immediately we thought that our perfect house is going to be in the city. it's not going to be a monument that you can see from outside and know exactly what the building looks like. But we wanted to make a house in a way that's sandwiched in between buildings. It's very much a part of the urban fabric, of the neighborhood. And a place which has grown, a home that has grown organically. And depending on which part of the street you approach your home from, you see something completely different. So the house was in a way very much inspired from the informal neighborhoods of Tokyo, Shanghai, Bombay, Rome, where you don't know where one building stops and the other ends. So in a way, it's the opposite of what is architecture. And also, I like the way that people use spaces, how they let light in, and sometimes they're not design spaces. And these are some amazing, this space is from hidden Shanghai. You wouldn't think that Shanghai even has spaces like that anymore. And I like the house that has transparency and privacy, where maybe you can look out, but people can't look inside. And this image for me really captured that. And of course, I also love the fact that this woman is still posing for the camera, although she doesn't know that the camera can see her face. And I like that analogy for the home. So we organized our home around this idea of series of spaces or activities that are interlinked around a courtyard in the middle. And the idea that no matter what you're doing in the home, even if you're doing a chore like making something or doing your homework, or someone is bathing or someone's cooking, you're connected with each other. And this idea that you do things in the home together and that nothing is a chore in the home. And this was just the facade from outside, which was in fact just a series of volumes coming together. And so we created our home in the way that you start with the salon. And then we said the sleeping area can be very close to the salon, because for me, a bed is not something you just sleep in at night. It's also a social space for the family when you have very close friends. And then the space was linked to dressing up. And I like the fact that we stopped spending time in the morning to get ready. It's just something we do. But can we make rituals out of these activities of looking after yourself, of a space for well-being, for meditation, which is linked to bathing, which for me is also linked to well-being, and cooking, and this relationship between the fact, like in India, you have Ayurveda, that whatever you put on your body has to be good enough to eat. So I like this idea that your bathing space is very close to your kitchen. And maybe you have ingredients like yogurt, turmeric, sandalwood from your kitchen that you can use for bathing, and they are. So, and then we have a workshop, because I like the idea that we make things in our house and we sell things to the neighborhood. So it's not just a house like you have so many neighborhoods in our cities now, where you live somewhere and you work somewhere and there's no link. And domestic areas are dead during the day because nobody's working there anymore. So this was the salon space that you enter, and when you're sitting on the day bed, you can see people coming into your house, but there isn't a door. And how do you create that sense of light, creating a mood in the space? And then you can see how the salon has this window with a T, and then it's related to your sleeping area. So there's a real interconnectedness between the spaces. And then, of course, we see the bed as a platform to have tea, to be together as a family. And then we created this dressing table, which almost defined the dressing space. So a lot of the pieces we do sometimes actually came from this project. We created the Chandlo dressing table to bring back that joy of dressing up in the morning. And enjoying the things that you have in the house, rather than them all being, shut in a cupboard. Maybe they can be outside or in a cabinet that you can enjoy them. Simple, humble, everyday things. And actually, the Chandlo dressing table was a direct result of the Das House project, where we wanted to create a space, again, through a piece of furniture. And of course, you have the mirror and the cabinet, but you also have a tinted mirror, because we don't feel beautiful every day in the morning. So maybe you can have a slightly more blurry image of yourself, or a rose-tinted image of yourself. And you can see the sort of deconstructed feeling of the piece. I love this piece somehow, I think. And you know, for me and Jonathan, it's really great because people see this work and they see some of the Moroso work, and I love the fact that you think, is it coming from the same place? And we often feel that there's this almost this schizophrenia in our work, that we love very utilitarian, architectural design, but then we love embellishment, we love materials, we love celebration, color, joy in the pieces. And then this was the concept for the bathing space, where you have the ingredients from cooking, which could be shared in the spa or the hammam. And I like the idea, in your home, you should be able to bathe in your courtyard. Why not? It's your personal space. So we had the shower in the courtyard next to the well-being space. And for us, the well-being space was this idea where you just sit. There's no furniture, really. You just sit, you can meditate, you can do your yoga, you can have a tea, you can write. And again, it's looking into the courtyard and putting materials together. Don't want to go on and on about it. But these are some of the ingredients we imagine could be used between the fluid spaces. Then this was another table that we did, and we said the best place to eat in the house is the courtyard outdoors. So nobody's complaining about the view. You know, everybody gets a good view of the sky. And then also this idea that actually normally when we are eating, our children might be doing homework, or we are working and the family is eating. So we created this table in a way which was a direct result of doing 2 or 3 activities together in a home. And then this was our shop, workshop for the house. One of the things that we've realized over the years, that sometimes a lot of the work that we do is perhaps also sometimes it works very well for industrial companies, but sometimes it's too experimental for industrial companies. And a couple of years ago, we started a collaboration with Gallery Creo, which is in my opinion, a very intelligent gallery working with Burlex and Jasper and all the designers that I admire and love. And we started creating some of our more experimental pieces with Creo. And this was a side table that we've just launched with them. It's called Chance Encounter, where we are playing really with forms, coming together, combining materials, and also experimenting with the form of the pieces. This is another table that we've done with them. And a mirror called Squareable Loon, which is coming very much from this geometrical concept that you cannot make a square out of a circle unless you take an arc. So we played with that concept of the Squareable Loon. And this is the most recent project that we've launched with them. It's called Kundan, which is inspired from a technique of making jewels inlaid with resin. And again, you can see, I don't know if you see it, but for me, there's a real link between the paper planes chair, the rabari, again, where you have the grid, and then you try to break the grid and you try to create a sort of pattern. And in this case, the way we did it was that the cabinets had a number or a sign, so you could combine it in any way, the doors that you wanted to. And finally, I want to, is it the final one? No, maybe there's the 2 more. Normally, when we work with companies, they never tell you what is the budget or that the piece has to cost so much. None of them. And it was really interesting because last year we met with Rolf Hay. You probably know the brand Hay, who I think is amazing. And Rolf was really interesting. He said, Nipa, people who really love design can't afford it. So his idea really is that you make design for people who love design. And he said the people who have money, they don't like contemporary design. They like something else. So I love this idea that he really wanted to do design for people who love design and that people who want to buy design and can afford it. And he came to us with a very strict retail price for the chair. He said, this is how much I want to sell it for. But I don't care what you do. But this is what my target is. And for us, it was really challenging because we also talked about, okay, how do you not compromise on design, but maybe you have to reduce the number of hours it takes to upholster something, or how the shell is made, or how the pattern is cut. So it was a really interesting way for us to work with them and to try to not compromise on design, but to really think about the cost of making things. And this is a chair that we launched with them again in April, and it's ready for production. And it's called Uchiwa. It's like a back of a Japanese fan. And it's a shell. It's a hard injection molded shell with a upholstered component inside. And again, it's a chair that could be in a contract environment. So we did two versions. You have a soft duvet version, which is more for the home. And then you have the more simpler polyurethane version for offices, for lobbies. And again, in this, we really played with the material combinations and how the leather can be applied without cutting it, without having soft padding at the back. And then how can we conceal the stitch details and make it into a design feature. As you see, the dark edge around the chairs became a really strong design feature. And finally, I want to show you this project, which is, we were invited to design an ice cream by Häagen-Dazs. And it's interesting because this project, in a way, in design, we don't think ice cream, we don't think design. And it's a project that has had the most attention from the general public because, of course, it's something they really relate to. It's an ice cream bomb. They invited us to make a bomb. They invited us to make a special edition ice cream. So, of course, why we decided to do the project is because actually ice cream is manufactured. It's made. You need molds to make an ice cream. It's made under very, very strict conditions of hygiene, of temperature, because when they make the ice cream, they pour hot water on the mold, but it has to come off in a second because it shouldn't melt the ice cream. And so we had all these constraints, and we really loved that idea that, you know, ice cream is also a material, and we could design an ice cream. And of course, we challenged them, so we made it into a sphere. So we said, okay, that means you have to make two molds. You have to have two molds for it. And so there was a lot of experimentation that went into making this ice cream, and it's called the Ice Moon. It was for Christmas, and we liked this idea of the film, the Voyage to the Moon by Georges Méliès. And then also there's a beautiful Bollywood song in which the song is about imagine if the moon was made out of ice cream, and there's this whole film where you go to the moon and it's just all ice cream. So it kind of worked really well, this leap of imagination for the ice cream. And there it is. 10 people can share this ice cream. And it was really delicious. And then we also made the red moon, because you have the orange moon as well. And with the craters and the feeling. And that's it, really.